Hello there folks, Halo here, and welcome to my Spark Inquisitor carry guide for duo party play in Path of Exile 3.20. This character has been updated significantly from the 3.19 version. We've made a lot of general improvements. The 200 Chaos version and the 2000 Chaos version in specific have been drastically improved along with the Simulacrum variant. I'm going to go through some of the changes we've made. I'm going to answer some of the questions that people frequently asked. I'll go through some of the little tweaks that I've made and about what some content about what you should farm and just a few other general things. This isn't a replacement guide for the one I made before. This is more of an update video and more of just the highlights. I just don't have time to do more. I've got like 10 hours of classwork I've still got to do before I can go to sleep. So I'm only going to get a couple hours of sleep before league starts. So it's just been crazy. So hopefully you bear with me as this is going to be a little bit shooting by the hip, not a lot of planning and preparation involved. But hey, as long as it comes out before league start, right? I'm doing my best here. Future Halo here, editing this segment in to tell you that the Discord server is an amazing resource that you absolutely should be taking advantage of. We basically have 24/7 live tech support for your build. There's like almost 2,000 people here now. There's a LFG channel if you're looking to find people to play with, or if your duo partner is offline and you just want to pug a random person to run some maps with. There's lots of people looking to do that on League Start. So check out the Discord server. There'll be a link in the description. This is an invaluable resource for getting help switching between these versions of the build. And it's also just a really friendly, nice place to check out. So Discord server is your new best friend. So one of the core changes is using Heatshiver on kind of everything. This item is absolutely broken. I didn't want to include it in the 3.19 version because, are you really freezing enemies? Is it really ethical to check that box in Path of Building? A lot of people were hyping it up. We also didn't know what the rarity was going to be if it was changed, and I didn't want to debate people to build around an item that may not be attainable or may be prohibitively expensive. But it turns out that this item is dirt cheap. It's super common, and it's absolutely insane. So you'll notice in the configuration, this is the enemy frozen box is checked. And let me tell you why that's ethical. Because we pick up the freeze duration nodes here for 90 and the mastery. So this wheel gives us 50% because 20 plus 30 and then 60%. This gives us 110% increased freeze duration just from this wheel. You can also pick up elemental focus for another 20% freeze duration. The effective non-damaging ailments doesn't actually apply to freeze duration. It's a little weird how that's calculated, but the duration that you get, it means that so the way freeze works is you have to hit an enemy. I think the threshold is like 5% of their health. There's a certain threshold that you have to reach, right? And all hits that can freeze will freeze, but if the freeze duration is lower than 0.3 seconds, then that freeze is completely discarded and doesn't apply. So you need to hit enemies hard enough to be freezing them for 0.3 seconds, or you don't actually freeze them. Bosses can be frozen, but they won't have their action speed reduced by 100%. They'll just be like the same effective chilled. So like this is actually ethical for the feared. If you're hitting hard enough, you can freeze those bosses, even though it doesn't like stop them in their tracks because they're bosses. But basically, this item's insane. We've taken freeze duration where applicable, I think on all the variations of the build, because not only is it an amazing defensive stat, because anything that doesn't immediately die, it's really helpful if it can't move. It's one of those stats that in practice significantly increases your DPS, even though it doesn't increase your PoB number. It's in the same level as like skill duration or projectile speed for Spark, where it's like those are things that in your character are really important to have, even though it may not seem that way. What else do we have? When playing with the Annihilating Light, I decided that trying to cap your res while away from the Aurabot without using a bismuth flask was kind of dumb. And the reason for that is because either you're next to your Aurabot and you can't, or you have capped res no matter what your flasks are, and you have capped you have your evasion and armor from like Determination Grace, or you're away from your Aurabot but you still have your flasks up, which means you still have armor and evasion from your flasks, so you don't necessarily immediately die. And so if you have your flasks up, you can also have a bismuth flask up. Or you are away from your Aurabot and you don't have flasks active, and even if you're not, even if you are capped res from gear, you're still going to die because you don't have armor or evasion, and you lose your energy shield, and you probably don't have soul link on you. So it's like, I've decided to just use like a bismuth flask with the res suffix on these versions, because in my experience, if you're always either next to your Aurabot or you have flasks up. So trying to fit and spend extra currency on getting like extra resist that doesn't meaningfully make your character more powerful. It's was completely comfortable just running a bismuth flask for any time I was out of my Aurabot's purity range. And it was completely fine. So that's what I've done on these versions of the build. There's lots of places you can get more res if you really want to, but I think it's completely unnecessary. Bismuth flasks are just broken. Like, even without a good prefix, it has like 30 seconds of uptime, which is, it's just crazy, right? And if you're doing a boss fight, so you're not getting flask charges, then you're always going to be by your Aurabot anyways. So what else do we have? I have smoothed out the leveling a little bit. I've swapped some skills and points around just a small amount. The versions that we have, I've completely removed the feared variant, not only because the height of hubris modifier seems to be gone from the Atlas tree, so there's not as crazy of modifiers on feared anyways, but because the 200C version can kind of just do feared. Let me untick these. These are for other versions. Like, I wish you could have separate configurations for different versions, because it's nice to have it all in one POB so you can directly compare back and forth, but it'd be nice to be able to have a different configuration page with like a drop down, just like you can do with like items or passive tree. But I digress. Let's see. Yeah, the feared version is gone. You can just do the 200C version. If you still somehow don't have enough damage in the 200C version, there's lots of ways to increase it. One thing I would do would be pick up this wheel, take the +1 intensity mastery, and run like pinpoint. That'd be a significant amount more damage. You could get actual crit multi on your jewels. Point is, this version can do feared just fine, so I haven't worried about it. The other thing is, because we're using Heatshiver, and because it's just really good, getting freeze prolif is very, very important. So you can just buy a like 8 passive cold cluster and just roll on it. You can alt augment, or you can chaos spam, just even alt spamming, alt augment, regaling. There's a lot of combinations that push blast freeze to the front. So this is very, very, you don't need disorienting display specifically, but there's a lot of notables. So you can just either test it in Path of Building by just changing the notables and seeing what Path of Building says will happen, or you can just socket it on your tree while you're crafting it to get one that pushes blast freeze up. The alternative to that is to use a freeze implicit, because there is an Eldritch implicit that we use in like this version, where it freezes you, inflict spread to other enemies in a certain radius. That's the exact same modifier as blast freeze. You really want one or the other. It's extremely powerful. So if you have it on your gloves, then you can use a better cluster jewel that has more damage or res, or there's lots of things you can get on a large cluster. So, but trying to roll for a specific Eldritch implicit on a pair of gloves while in day 1 or 2 is just not fun and not particularly cost efficient, so I just use blast freeze on these versions instead. And onto the Magic Find version, we've made significant improvements. It is now just way better all around. It doesn't use Heatshiver, because Heatshiver requires you to use Double Call of the Brotherhoods to convert your lightning to cold, and if you're using Double Call of the Brotherhoods and a unique helmet, then you lose a lot of Magic Find stats. So it's you're cutting your damage by 75% by playing a Magic Find version, but that doesn't really matter because you can just still be blasting red maps even with like 10 million damage over here. So we've got 78 quant and 550 rarity, which is extremely good for how easy this is to put together and how strong it is. Like otherwise, we've embraced Annihilating Light. If you want to run a Bismuth Flask as well, you can certainly do that. Otherwise, there's it uses an Amethyst Flask because getting Chaos Res on a Magic Find version is kind of hard. There's a lot you can swap around and tinker with here, but this template is much, much stronger than the old Magic Find version used to be. It's got like 2 or 3 times as much damage with only with about the same Magic Find stats. So Seek did a lot of work on this one to make it really good. One thing we do is we anoint Overcharged. This is something we don't like to do for the other versions, which is getting charges on kill, because you want to have your full DPS up against boss fights where it matters most, right? But on a Magic Find character, you're always killing stuff, so overcharged becomes an extremely valuable anoint. So because the ascetic needs a magic item and a white item equipped, what we've done is we're using just a pair of white gloves, and you corrupt them until you either get enfeeble, temp chains, or base to spell crit on your gloves, and all three of those corruptions are really good. You should only need to do like 10 to 15 pairs of gloves, just pick them up off the ground and corrupt them. It should be very, very easy, you know. Otherwise, you'd have to run like a white item in one of these slots, and all of these just give you magic finds, so you obviously don't want to do that. Let's go. We talked about the 200C version, the improvements. The 2000 Chaos version has seen significant improvements. Like, it is just way, way better. It is kind of crazy how much better this version is compared to what it used to be. It does have power, frenzy, and endurance charges. This version has hatred and haste, so maybe the numbers weren't quite accurate before because I forgot to change them after I was tinkering before. So not only does this version have almost twice as much damage as it used to, it also has, so we drop the freeze duration nodes on this because we're hitting for so much that you don't actually need the freeze duration to freeze things like feared bosses. If you are trying to farm uber bosses with this version, you can just drop like drop Chaos Res, drop a Cluster Jewel, pick up the freeze duration from this wheel, get the mastery, and then take this, and you should be able to reliably freeze uber bosses at this point in investment. But the main thing is we passed all the way down to Inveterate because this spell suppress wheel is kind of broken. You have a really hard time getting spell suppression on Gaer now that they nerfed all the Gaer modifiers. So, but yeah, this 2000 Chaos version, it has almost twice as much damage, and it caps spell suppress, and it has more health and energy shield. We've switched over to using a Vaal regalia. I think you can make this for like 4 divines, maybe less. Like, maybe you don't get an energy shield roll prefix, but like you can either get % increased energy shield, flat energy shield, or life as a prefix roll, so it's not unlikely to get something like this. Basically, you just get a like either a Shaper or Redeemer Vaal regalia. You roll the proper modifier, then you awaken or orb the other one onto it. It's probably cheaper to use a Redeemer Vaal regalia because you can just buy a 6-link one and then slam a Redeemer orb onto it instead of trying to buy a Shaper Vaal regalia and 6-link it yourself. That's just one little thing you can do to save currency there. And honestly, you should probably just elevate the spell crit because it's not that much more expensive to do, and then you can drop a little bit of crit chance elsewhere. On the topic of crit chance, just a general thing, a lot of this gear has strength on it. Like, you'll notice the like if we go back to the 200 Chaos version, we have 360 strength, and that is not a dead stat. Strength is actually one of your best damage stats. Like, when you're not crit capped, getting 30 strength is like 3.4% more damage. So much so that we don't even get crit multi on the amulet at this version because just getting attributes for strength is just better. So don't ignore the strength when you recreate these characters. Like, it won't stop you from equipping items, but it'll be a significant damage loss because of the Righteous Providence node, which gives us crit chance for strength, and Iron Will, which gives us spell damage for strength. So back to the 2000 Chaos version, though. Let's see, what else do we have to cover? Yeah, we're not 90% max res because I've just anointed Prismatic Skin. There's so many ways to get that last 1%. You can get it on a cluster notable. You can pick up an Impossible Escape somewhere that has it. Like, you could just get an Impossible Escape, Imbalanced Guard, and then allocate Soul of Steel, Prismatic Skin to get your 3%, and then you free up an Anoint, but this one's pretty expensive. You can use a Sublime Vision because the only aura skill that you use is Purity of Elements on this character. Like, Petrified Blood, it doesn't have the aura tag. Same with like Arctic Armor or Blood and Sand. Like, they aren't aura skills. They just reserve life or mana depending on if you have arrogance or not. You can use a Sublime Vision for 3 max res for the Purity of Elements one. That price fluctuates. You can, yeah, you could get like max res on a body armor if you didn't need the spell crit, or you had a frenzy charge generation somewhere else. If you just were okay using Anomalous Blood Rage, or the alt quality one that gives you a chance for frenzy on hit, then you could just awaken or orb max res. There's so many ways to get it that I didn't want to put a specific one in, because the truth is 89% is fine. Your spell suppress capped, you have like over 7k EHP, it doesn't really matter. Just find a way to do it if you really want to. But I didn't want to put a specific method on this, because which one is best for your character is going to depend on market prices. It's going to depend on, you know, lots of things. What else? The Simulacrum version has been also significantly improved. This is just way better than it was last league. Funny enough, the Simulacrum version was already using freeze duration just as a defensive layer. So the fact that it wasn't using Heatshiver was kind of troll. We've also picked up Ralakesh's Impatience. You're always standing still, so, you know, why wouldn't you use Ralakesh's Impatience? It just gives you Frenzy Power Endurance charges. What else do we have? All these flasks are set to use when charges reach full, and that just completely automates the process. I like this a lot. It also stops your flasks from using a extra time. So if you have use at the end of duration, then like your flasks will continue to run while you're picking up items from the Simulacrum waves, and that's really annoying. So this is one, you know, for the 200C version, like I don't have enchants on this because it doesn't really matter. Like if you prefer use when charges reach full, which I do for general content, then, you know, you can do that, but it's also fine. The reason there's an enchant here is because it is important. It makes the build feel a lot nicer to play. We're also always by our Aurabot, so we just don't have to worry about resists at all. Like the Annihilating Light is just free. I've dropped the Thread of Hope. I've dropped Glancing Blows and Divine Shield in the Simulacrum version. We're just going to anoint counterweight, and then we'll stick to the right side of the tree. We'll take Ghost Dance. It just works out a little bit better, but basically the Simulacrum version has like over twice as much damage as it used to, and it lost Call of the Void, so it lost a little bit of defense, but it gained a little bit of EHP. It's just much stronger overall, right? You just kind of kill things and don't let them hit you. One thing I want to re-emphasize is, because the 800C Aurabot only gets 3 damage auras, for general content, you want Zealotry, you want Wrath, and then you want Haste. Because Haste is like most of a damage aura, but it gives you move speed. But for Simulacrum, the move speed doesn't matter, so you should just have your Aurabot switch the Haste out for Hatred, because they're both green socket 50% damage auras that don't have any masteries or aura-specific reservation efficiency. It's really easy for the Aurabot to just hot swap those two. So just make sure your Aurabot's running Hatred, just because you're converting to cold already, right? So the extra more multiplier is just really nice. The gear is pretty simple. You'll notice some of the gear in the versions have the stat of life regeneration rate. This is actually really, really important, because your life regeneration rate increase that goes over to your energy shield regeneration rate, so it helps you much more comfortably sustain Righteous Fire. I've also put crit multi on these jewels, which this might be a little, you know, you might not be able to get crit multi and life and proj speed. Just get life and one of those two, it'll be completely fine. And then, the final thing to note is the 2000 Chaos version, we're using a Hatred Watcher's Eye base crit. Just to get the, so it's a little crangled, because the wall affected by hatred doesn't work, because we're getting our stats from the Aurabot through the custom modifiers section, so we don't have hatred in our skills. So that doesn't work unless you put the line in there by itself. The fire leech is life while affected by anger. That's a dead stat. The hatred one's just the one you care about. On the topic of Watcher's Eyes, for the Simulacrum version, if you can get the ES on hit while affected by discipline, a Watcher's Eye, it is absolutely amazing. It truly makes you, like, your energy shield, it's like having instant, like, old ghost, like old Vaal packed instant leech. It's a very insane stat, but it's not necessary, and it's usually kind of expensive, so I don't want to put it on the POB. But yeah, if you can get the ES on hit while affected by discipline, Watcher's Eye, it's insane. What else? I think that's about it for the build update. We'll talk about it on a little bit about what you should farm. If you are having to ask what you should farm, and so like meaning if you're not an experienced enough player to be able to just pick a strategy and send it, then what you should do is Probably just simulacrums. They're extremely profitable. They make lots of currency. The simulacrum version kind of trivializes it. You can get wave 30 deathless almost every time with this and the 800C Aurabot. And it's just a crazy amount of currency. You don't actually need to reach wave 30 to profit simulacrums, so you can start doing them before you have all this gear if you're, if you feel like doing so. About, I think, wave 15, 16, 17 is when you start to just make profit for anything over that, not really counting leveling gems. But yeah, simulacrums are the simplest way to go from, if you're a kind of player who just does Alch and Go, who hasn't ever really hit like big league currency farming, simulacrums is the simplest way to do that. So what you should do is you should go to PoE Ninja and look up which level 21 gems are selling for the most. This will usually be meta spell gems like Explosive Arrow. It's not a spell, but it scales its damage off gem level. Spark, or Seismic Trap. Those types of things, you can level them to 20 and then corrupt them and sell them at 21. Alternatively, what you should do if you have more currency, you should buy alt quality gems. So like Spark has two that are good, both Divergent and Anomalous. Some people use one or the other. The nice thing about alt quality gems is that you don't really lose a lot of currency when you corrupt them and stay level 20. So if you have a 2020 like normal quality gem, if you corrupt it, it'll lose value and sell for less. But the alt quality gems don't really lose as much value when you corrupt them. Because a lot less people are leveling them, and then you still have the big payout if you hit the 2120, right? So a lot of the gems, like Seek and I leveled last league, we did like the alt quality Arrogance one that gives increased reservation efficiency. We did a bunch of sparks, like Divergent Spark and Anomalous Spark. But you can just go to PoE Ninja, search for gems, search for like which ones at level 21 are selling for the most, and then just level gems. You should set a bow in your offhand with 6 sockets and get the Maloney's quiver, so you get 3 sockets in your quiver, so it's just an extra 3 gem slots to level. And so that's a very good way to make currency. If you're not leveling gems in Simulacrum, you're doing it wrong, full stop. The other thing with Simulacrums is as you do them, you're going to build up in your stash tabs a bunch of you're going to build up essences and fossils and catalysts and scarabs, and those things aren't really easy to sell one at a time. It's just not efficient. So what you should do is just run simulacrums as long as you possibly can. Sell anything that's high value, or like div cards that sell for, like a divine or something, or 50 chaos. You sell your expensive things so you can get just enough so you can sustain simulacrums as long as possible. Because when you sell all of the loot that you get, you want to do it in bulk, because not only does it just take way less time, right? So time is currency, right? Do you want to spend time selling things for 1 chaos at a time, or do you want to run another simulacrum, right? It's more efficient to sell in bulk. But also, you can sell fossils and essences and stuff. Instead of selling them for chaos, search for what they're listed for in divines and sell 40 of a certain essence for a divine. That is, you will make 20 to 30% more currency for the same amount of essences if you have that bulk amount to sell. Now, if you don't want to do that, or if you don't have enough bulk to sell that way, then there is in the Forbidden Trove Discord server, there is a bulk buy and sell section for people who will list their entire tab, their entire essence tab or fossil tab, and they have automated tools that will help you pull that information, list it, and sell it all at once. And then you can let somebody else do the bulk listing. So do one of those two things. If you're trying to list them manually, you're doing it wrong. Simulacrums are the kind of content where you farm them and you're just selling enough to continue doing them, and you feel like you're not making much profit. And then after doing 30 of them or whatever, you sell everything in bulk and you suddenly have an insane amount of currency. So it's there's a big cash out. If you ever play TFT, or where you have the econ traits where you just keep building up until you get the big loot explosion at the end, or there's loot explosions in other games like that. Onto the Feared. The Feared is still perfectly viable. You know, the height of hubris seems to have been removed, so we might not be getting, it might not be possible to get like 200 or 300 quant feareds anymore, but if the feared is dropping less loot, and if invitations are dropping less loot, then Maven splinters are going to be less common, which means they're going to be more expensive. And the same with all of those uniques. So will you get less loot? Yes, but so will everybody else, which will reduce supply, which will increase price. So it's not like a strict reduction to profitability. It's feared is always insane if you can do it. So highly recommend it, but you do kind of need to know the fights, and it's not as simple as Simulacrums, but it is a little more fun in my opinion. Like watching the big scary bosses instantly die is great. Final thoughts. Asik and I are both going to be streaming League Start, so you can watch our progression from both of our perspectives. I'm actually going to be playing a Magic Find Tornado Shot character, which I'm going to do a quick short little video on. Probably it's not like an actual guide because we still haven't figured the build out yet. But we've both done like feared farming and simulacrum farming a ton already, so we're just trying to do something new just to see how that works. We're going to be doing daily recap videos. We're just going to sit down and record like a recap of how the day went, so that should be actually good content coming every single day. And so you can follow along both with those videos, and you can follow along with our profiles and stuff if you want to watch our experience in Path of Exile 3.20. And yeah, wish me luck. I guess this is about the end of the video. I've got to go do like 10 hours of math and then maybe try to sleep. So guess I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Hopefully I get enough sleep that I can function. So